You've shared some really fascinating material with us today.
hmm
And at its heart, it seems like there's this longing for the sacred, right? A desire to connect with the mysterious heart of our Catholic faith.
Absolutely. It feels fundamental, doesn't it? That draw towards something deeper, beyond the everyday.
It really does. And that leads us straight into this deep dive, focusing on Pope Leo's recent address to the Eastern Catholic churches. There's been quite a bit of buzz about it.
Yes, definitely generating interest, what it might signal for the wider church.
Exactly. And we're looking at it through the lens of an article from Catholicism.org. It's titled, Pope Leo's Address to Eastern Churches. We Need Your Sense of Mystery. It's by Brother Andre Marie, dated May 14th, 2025.
A timely piece. Pope Leo is still, relatively speaking, early in his pontificate, so such addresses are watched closely.
Right. So our mission today really is to unpack the key takeaways from that address, especially as Brother Andre Marie sees them. We want to explore the implications, particularly for those of you who feel a strong connection to traditional expressions of faith.
Like the traditional Latin Mass.
Precisely. The article really frames this address as potentially, well, hopeful from that perspective. So maybe let's start with the context. Where and when did this happen?
Okay, so the setting was Rome. Pope Leo was speaking to Eastern Catholics who were there for the Jubilee of the Eastern Churches.
Ah, the Jubilee.
Yes, in the Paul VI Audience Hall. And this wasn't just a few people we're talking. Patriarchs, cardinals, bishops, priests, religious, lay faithful. A significant gathering.
Wow.
And the article makes a point of mentioning something important. Representatives were there from places like Ukraine, Syria, Lebanon, places really suffering from conflict.
That adds such a layer of seriousness to it all, doesn't it?
It really does. And naturally, Pope Leo spoke about peace, the need for peace. The article notes this has been a consistent theme for him, acknowledging the suffering in these Eastern communities.
Makes sense. But there was another part of the address that really stood out, especially, as you said, for those interested in tradition.
Yes, the part where he talks about what the West can learn from the East, that caught people's attention.
Exactly that. He spoke quite beautifully, really, about the Eastern liturgies, their customs, their spirituality. But the striking part was him saying, quite directly, that the Western Church needs to learn from them to recover a sense of mystery.
Recover it, implying it's been diminished somehow.
That seems to be the implication. And here's the key quote, pulled from the article, which quotes the Pope. He said, "The Church needs you. The contribution that the Christian East can offer us today is immense."
Immense. Strong word.
Very. He continues, "We have great need to recover the sense of mystery that remains alive in your liturgies." He talks about liturgies engaging the whole person, singing of salvation's beauty, evoking wonder. Wonder at how God's majesty embraces our human frailty.
That's quite poetic, actually.
It is. And then he gets more specific. It is likewise important to rediscover, especially in the Christian West, a sense of the primacy of God, the importance of mystagogy.
Mystagogy, that's about leading people deeper into the mysteries, often through the liturgy itself, right?
Exactly. And he lists these Eastern spiritual values: constant intercession, penance, fasting and weeping for one's own sins and for those of all humanity.
Penthos.
Penthos, that deep sorrow and repentance. He's really highlighting specific elements there.
He is. It's not just general praise. It's like he's pointing to a spiritual toolkit the West needs.
And then he follows that up with encouragement for the Eastern churches themselves. Yes, he explicitly tells them to hold on to their traditions. The article quotes this part too. "It is vital, then, that you preserve your traditions without attenuating them, for the sake perhaps of practicality or convenience."
Don't water them down.
Right, lest they be corrupted by the mentality of consumerism and utilitarianism. Don't let modern pressures erode them.
That's a very direct instruction, really. Preserve them, don't dilute them for convenience.
And this is where Brother Andre Marie, the author of the article, really comes in, and where it connects for you listening, if you cherish tradition.
Right.
He sees a clear parallel. All this beauty, the transcendence, the sacredness Pope Leo admires in the East. Brother Andre Marie argues those are the very hallmarks of the traditional Latin liturgy, too.
Ah, so he's drawing a line between the Pope's praise for the East and the qualities valued in the traditional Latin Mass.
Precisely. He takes those elements, Pope Leo mentioned, primacy of God, mystagogy, penance, penthos, and says essentially these are alive and well in the traditional Latin expression of the faith.
And the article, I assume, then contrasts this with the Novasordo.
It does, again, presenting it as the author's perspective. It suggests that perhaps the Reformed liturgy doesn't emphasize these specific elements in quite the same way. or as strongly. We need to be clear, that's Brother Andre Marie's reading of the situation.
Understood. It's his interpretation being reported here.
Right. And he brings in some history to back this up, mentioning Dom Prosper Granger.
The great 19th century liturgist, very influential. He loved the Eastern rites.
He did. But the article stresses Granger saw the Latin and Eastern traditions as complementary, two sides of the same ancient coin, sharing this deep historical continuity.
Shared heritage.
But then the author, Brother Andre Marie, laments what he calls the sad shattering of that continuity after the council. That's his viewpoint on post-Vatican II liturgical changes.
Okay, so he sees a break there.
Yes. And understanding that viewpoint helps explain why Pope Leo's words are seen as so significant, so hopeful.
Because if the Pope values these traditional elements so highly in the East.
Exactly. The hope, as Brother Andre Marie frames it, is if Pope Leo is telling the Eastern churches to preserve their unattenuated traditions because they hold this vital sense of mystery and the sacred,
then couldn't that same logic apply to the traditional forms of the Latin Rite?
that's the core of the hope expressed in the article. If the reasons for preservation are the inherent spiritual value, the resistance to utilitarianism, the focus on God's primacy, well, couldn't those same arguments support preserving the traditional Latin Mass?
It makes logical sense from that perspective. The principles seem transferable.
And that quote from Pope Leo just echoes, doesn't it? It is vital, then, that you preserve your traditions without attenuating them,
For the sake, perhaps, of practicality or convenience.
lest they be corrupted by the mentality of consumerism and utilitarianism. Those listening who love the TLM are hearing those words addressed to the East and wondering, hoping. Maybe this reflects a broader appreciation for tradition.
It certainly raises the question, could this be perhaps an early sign, a signal that the value of tradition, the importance of the sacred mystery, is being recognized more universally beyond just the Eastern context?
That's definitely the hope Brother Andre Marie conveys. He sounds genuinely heartened, seeing it as a call for appreciating tradition across all rites. He finishes by saying, essentially, that those who worship using the traditional Latin rites would welcome a similar message with open arms.
So if we boil it down, the key takeaway from this source, this interpretation, is Pope Leo's focus on mystery, the primacy of God, preserving tradition in the East, and how that's being seen as a potential signpost, a source of encouragement maybe for those devoted to the traditional Western liturgy.
Absolutely. So it leaves us, in you listening, with something to ponder, doesn't it?
Oh.
Considering Pope Leo's strong words to the East, what parts of that sense of the sacred, the mysterious, found in traditional faith expressions resonate most with your own spiritual life?
Yeah, and how could this renewed focus on tradition, on this sense of ancient mystery, actually enrich the whole church, East and West together?
It's a powerful thought. Thank you so much for sharing this source and diving into it with us. Lots to think about there.
Definitely. Hopefully it encourages a deeper reflection on our rich traditions and the beauty within our Catholic faith.